You're such a ding dong. Actually, yeah, sometimes.
Well, there you go. Okay.
I know I get stared at, especially when I go to big conferences like NAR.
Yeah.
I used to get stared at when I would go to big conferences like Women's Council, but that made me stand out and made people approach me.
Yeah.
Whether they asked about the tattoo or whether they are asked, "Are you comfortable?"
Welcome to Agent Success Podcast. If you're a real estate agent looking to succeed in today's crazy market, well, you're in the right place. Each week, we talk with successful real estate agents willing to share their expert insights, trade secrets, and mindset that help them to succeed. There's no fluff, just straight to the point content that prioritizes one thing above all, your success. So without further ado, let's cut to the chase.
Welcome to another episode of Cut to the Chase. I'm your host, Tim Chase at agentsuccesspodcast.com. I have a very awesome guest with me today. The one, the only, the most amazing, Wendy Bailey. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. Thanks. I almost said infamous, but then that would probably not go over really well. Unless it's like, you ever see Three Amigos with Chevy Chase? And we were talking about Martin Short and all that. So in Three Amigos, when they had to go fight the bad guy, they said, he's infamous. He's like, well, is that good or bad? Well, it's more than good. It's infamous. More than famous.
I thought you got infamous when you died.
Well, who knows? Well, it's not the infamous Wendy Bailey, at least not during working hours. Yeah. So, hey, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for being here.
Thanks
and
for
being able
inviting
to share all of your insights. You've been working we've known each other for quite a while, and you've been working in the real estate industry a good decade longer? How long have you been doing it?
9 years.
9 years. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And a year and a half as an admin assistant, and then got my license in 2016.
And then you just decided you were going to own a company and recruit a bunch of agents and make them all successful.
Yeah, hopefully.
So, yeah.
Hopefully they're successful.
So where are you working right now?
I am with Keller Williams Partners.
Okay. And what is your actual title? Is it just realtor, or do you do stuff with the company?
I'm a realtor, but I'm also the director of agent advocacy.
Agent advocacy. And what does that do?
So I bring in education to help mitigate risk for the agents in-house, keep them up to date also on things that are happening in private property rights and the legislative side. Also traveled conference across the country, representing Keller Williams at different events and speaking out and invited on panels and things of that nature.
Okay. So is there a high likelihood that agents could do something wrong and get in trouble?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with
one of the most litigious industries out there is real estate.
And then you have the new, Section 29 of the contract, which I'm just waiting for that to explode on 20% of the contracts that are out there.
It makes sense if the agent's properly educated, then it gives the buyer options, gives the seller options, and makes things more negotiable. Yeah,
and to be clear, just if you're listening and you're not in the state of Colorado, Section 29 has to deal with the new compensation rules,
right?
On that, and that's just where Colorado put it on their contract with Section 29. So, do you do any recruiting or anything like that, or is it just mainly education type stuff?
So I'm only 16 days into my new job. Okay. So far with Keller, it's been a lot of figuring out my role going forward, attending conference, trying to figure out what conferences I'm going to go to next year to develop new education programs and keep the agents up to date and do, like I said, kind of risk mitigation. I've been attending conferences, Keller Williams specific conferences, kind of going through leadership training. I'll be in Vail next week.
Okay.
At a summit there, meeting with some leadership there and getting some training and kind of direction from there as well.
Do you find it weird that you're going to go to Vail to a summit in Summit County, the summit of a mountain?
Possibly.
That's like three summits in a row.
It's a summit of a summit.
Yeah, you'll get there. Yeah. So, that sounds like a whole lot of work, really.
I was already doing it with my previous brokerage, just because I was passionate about it. So it was just a benefit that I think our agents received because of my passion for advocacy in the industry. But
are you doing real estate as clients buying, selling as well at the same time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I travel so much and to so many different conferences, Inman, RS Media, NAR conference across the country, I've developed a lot of connections. So 100% of my business is referral based.
Oh, nice.
And so I get to work with people who know other realtors that trust me. And so there's always, it's a warm handshake.
And I did notice that you used NAR instead of the term NAR that they don't want you to use any longer. So it was very correct of you. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Because NAR is, as we know, a Yiddish slang.
Yes, it is a derogatory term. And
in a language that only like 4,000 people speak in the entire world, right?
Doesn't matter. We want to make sure that we're not offending anybody.
Oh, my phone's ringing. Suspected. Should we take this on air? It's suspected spam. Oh, they hung up. Suspected spam would be a great one to take. We could. So I was just kind of joking about the Yiddish thing. I love all my Yiddish brothers and sisters. So all of them.
I know you're joking, but it happens to be D&I is a passion of mine.
Yeah, it's actually pronounced near or nar, not nar. I looked it up. It's true. I looked it up and I went through all the different pronunciations. I watched YouTube videos on it. And the reason I did this, Wendy, was because like about 4 months ago, you and I were doing a thing and you had mentioned that to me. I said, well, that's weird. I've never heard of that. I said, is that real? Mm-hmm. So then I went down a rabbit hole of Yiddish and its roots and how many, and actually there's like, I don't know, there's still like 100,000 people that speak it or something like that. But it's more of a slang type language. But as I was going down, I was like, well, how do you actually pronounce this? And so on these different YouTube videos of people who speak it and it's part of their language and culture, I never heard anybody actually say nar, I found that a little interesting.
Well, you know what I find interesting is the fact you had to research it and didn't take my word for it.
Oh, I took your word for it. That's why I went down the rabbit hole. I'm a rabbit hole kind of person.
Okay.
So let's get back on. Can you not derail me anymore with
Absolutely.
these
I'm sorry.
silly remarks?
Blinders. Got the blinders on.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a little distracting, but it's okay. So in real estate, in your last company, you recruited a lot of people, right? And you've gone over to Keller Williams, and this is, how did you say, 6 weeks?
6 days.
16
days.
16 days. Okay,
Yes.
so not very long at all.
No, sir.
You've barely got running over there.
Yep.
But I'm going to go to your overall experience. Okay. Now I know you've taught a lot of CE classes. You've had different events, and it all seems to center around making agents better as opposed to either making money as a CE teacher or trying to just recruit. I've seen you at a lot of stuff. I think we first met at maybe a women's council thing or something,
so. Yeah.
possibly, something like that. And it seems like you had always been in some sort of volunteer position, like something that most people don't want to do, right? And I know you say you're passionate about that. So right now, what you mentioned, you're at Pikes Peak Association of Realtors. What's your position there?
So at the local level, I'm currently serving as the chair-elect for the Pikes Peak Association of Realtors, chair of their board. I will be chair next year. At the state level, I'm currently sitting on the D&I committee for the Colorado Association of Realtors. And then this year at NAR, I'm on the Fair Housing Policy Committee, ensuring that there's policy in place so housing is available, equally available to everybody in the U.S.
Now, when you say housing available, are you, because I don't know how NAR, I imagine just buying and selling real estate is like what they're focusing on. But when you say housing available, are you saying, we have a lot, like right downtown here, we have, Catholic Charities, they get, 1,000 homeless people down there every afternoon to feed them lunch. Are you guys focused on the availability of purchasing a home? Or are you focused on homeless shelters? Are you focused on rentals?
Purchasing a home, so that there's not discrimination when a qualified buyer goes in to purchase a home, that there aren't policies in place or there aren't restrictions in place that prohibit somebody from purchasing or renting a property that they qualify for based on a protected class.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
Redlining and steering, things of that nature. Especially, so we also look at opportunities in lending. We have had the DOJ come in and talk to us about cases, especially one not too long ago in Houston, Texas, where loans were being denied by people of certain ethnicities, where equal qualifying white purchasers were being pre-approved for the loan, where the marginalized minorities were not being pre-approved for the loan when everything was exactly the same on the loan application.
So I have a crazy thought. Okay. So on the 1003, which is a loan application, what if you didn't allow the question of race and ethnicity, or even gender for that matter, right? Or if you did for government monitoring, but it was removed from the underwriter's view?
It still wouldn't fix the issue. Another issue that we've seen is that qualifications could be the same in an affluent neighborhood as they are in a lower income neighborhood. And there were less loans being approved in the lower income neighborhoods than there were in the affluent neighborhoods.
I would love to see data on this, because I have a hard time with it in that, number one, to me, you either qualify for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or FHA or you don't, right? Like whatever, you either do or you don't. But I have heard many times of that being the case. So when they say that all the loan data is the same, if you have a credit score that works, you have income that works and verifiable. Now that does come into actually some classes, some ethnicities are more prone to save cash, and then is the cash usable, right? So that would be a difference, but that would also be maybe a restriction in certain ethnic classes of, or even certain age categories. If you look, Great Depression, there was something like, I don't know, what was it, like 1,000 banks a month were failing, right? And so you go put your money in the bank, you may not have money, and it created this whole generation of people that are, I'm keeping my money where it's safe,
right,
in a shoebox under my bed, right? That's where I'm keeping it safe. But loans say we don't want any cash flow coming in that hasn't been sourced or seasoned for 60 days, which really isn't that hard to accomplish. Get it into the bank, let it sit for 60 days. But that does go against certain cultures, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? So is that the kind of thing that would be different? Because I just don't know how
I don't think so.
If you're approved, like I don't understand how you would get approved or not.
So this was physical banks. So walking into a physical bank to get a mortgage.
Okay. Well, I could see that. Yeah.
And then the banks that had a brick and mortar literally existing in the lower income areas. Again, same qualifications as a bank sitting in an affluent neighborhood.
Yeah.
They approved less minority loans in that area than in the...
I can see that, and thank you for the great commercial on why you should always use a mortgage broker. That's awesome.
It's not quite what I intended, but yeah.
But I mean, that's basically what you were saying, right? But I do understand. You got Bob over here who's worked at the bank for 47 years, and he's got certain belief systems, and you walk in, and I actually used to work with this guy, older gentleman, and he was maybe 80 at the time or something like that. He just, I don't know why I have loan officers sometimes that
are in their 80s.
Just never stop. But it's like realtors, like you could keep going forever. But he used to issue pre-approval letters. This is maybe like 10 or 15 years ago. And I didn't realize what he was doing for a little bit. He would issue a pre-approval letter, and I'd be like, okay, do we have income documentation? Do we have it? No, they're good. Yeah. It's like, whoa, pump the brakes, dude. What do you mean they're good? Did you run through Fannie Mae's system? Oh, no, trust me. They're going to, whether he was right or not isn't the point. I was like, whoa, dude, whoa. Yeah. So then we had to go through all of his files and make sure everything was, you're making data-based decisions. Yes. Instead of feeling. Like, you look pretty trustworthy. I'm saying you're approved, Wendy.
Yeah,
right?
No, I mean, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing for the realtor, that we should have consistent checks in place that we do for every single client. And we shouldn't skip one just because it's a referral from somebody we know. Yep. And that's where having good systems in place to make sure that you treat every single client the same, whether it be on the loan side or on the buy-sell side. Yeah. That just because your BFF is my BFF and I just met you, I'm not going to make you go through X, Y, and Z steps, but because this person called me off of a sign call, I'm going to go through X, Y, and Z steps. It could be seen as a form of discrimination.
Oh, it could absolutely. And I would say with mortgage brokering, I turned that around real quick. with mortgage brokering, I guess I could see how it could possibly end up being like if with a bad person or ethically challenged person or a legal type mindset, I can see how it could be a problem. But I say it would be a bigger problem when, at least on the loan side, when you do have that face-to-face meeting for your loan. And then you're because think about it, humans are funny creatures. Based off your accent, I'm going to judge you. Based off the speed of your speaking, I'm going to judge you. Based off how you're dressing, how you how you do your hair, what vehicle you pull up in. Like all these things are judgment points by a human. It shouldn't be, but it is. I used to work at a ski shop here in Springs. How long have you lived in Springs?
10 years.
Okay, so this was long before you got here. This is early 90s. I worked in a ski shop. It was actually in the chapel, or no, what's the schedule on the Citadel Mall? This is before Citadel Mall was basically before it was the Citadel Mall. It was a relatively safe place at the time, but this was in the early 90s, and I was I was young, and I thought grunge music was like the coolest music ever. That and some ska, right? Like kind of a good combination. So I grew myself a little goatee, had my boots, had my flannel, that kind of thing, and I basically rode bicycles and snowboarded. I thought that was pretty much my joy in life. Like they were, what else? But I also grew my hair long, so I kind of had hair down to here, And I had a manager that came up to me, and I'd sell skis and snowboards and stuff to people. And he came up to me, he's like, "Tim, I want you to cut your hair." And when you're young and you're like in your early 20s, like, "Oh, don't tell me what to do, man. I sell more than anybody else." He's like, "Yeah, but you got to understand, people are judging you for it, and I see it on the sales floor." And again, my naivete in youth is like, "Well, screw them if they're going to judge me. You know what I mean? That's their problem, not mine." And he said, "Well, you still close more than everybody. That's fine." Because I was kind of like, I was also hyper into sales, like the psychology of it, right? So I was like, I took it very serious about selling. But one thing it didn't click for me was my nihilist kind of like, I'm going to fight the system kind of, deep rooted belief system. But he said to me, he's like, "Tim, okay, look, after somebody talks to you for 3 or 4 minutes, you generally can get it sold, and you guys have great rapport and you do good. But why are you creating this barrier for yourself in that first 3 to 4 minutes, right? Like just eliminate the barrier." And I think that was the first time I realized, like, okay, whether I like it or not, people are going to judge me. And if I walk into a bank based off of how I am, I'm going to be judged. And I think it's really hard on the real estate side because you guys are way face-to-face compared to us. You guys are super face-to-face, right? Sometimes I actually don't meet my clients until closing. It's a lot of through secure portals and this and that. So it'd be very difficult in real estate.
I'm not your typical realtor either.
Yeah.
If you have not seen my legs that are tattooed from ankle to thigh, I
didn't notice. You have tattoos?
Yeah, 1 or 2. I guess I never outgrew my naivety, or I've been willing to accept it that if I have to overcome something, and if somebody doesn't want to work with me or because of my tattoos, then you're probably not a client I wanted to work with anyway.
Well, I think the question I really wanted to ask when you first came in was, do you think tattoos are helping you win in real estate?
You're such a ding dong. Actually, yeah, sometimes.
Well, there you go. Okay.
I know I get stared at, especially when I go to big conferences like NAR.
Yeah.
I used to get stared at when I would go to big conferences like Women's Council, but that made me stand out and made people approach me.
Yeah.
Whether they asked about the tattoo or whether they are asked, "Are you comfortable?"
Yeah.
I actually had somebody in leadership say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you got up on national stage and presented with a knee-length dress on." And I was like,
"Really?
Okay, well, if people don't like me because of that, great. But at the same time, she goes, "You've inspired me. I'm not going to wear pants to conference anymore. I'm actually going to wear the dresses I like."
I'm glad you finished that sentence. Thank you. So, I was like, "Whoa, where's she going with this?"
But it's a conversation.
NAR's gotten crazy.
It's been a conversation starter, icebreaker. And I think, I'm not saying that I've won opportunities, but I think it's opened doors for me because it's probably shut some doors for me too, but I could care less. It's probably a door I didn't want to walk through.
Well, but see, that's interesting though. That actually plays perfectly into what I guess the point I'm trying to make is humans judge, right? Humans judge. And so how do we lower that when we deal with people and in your position and when they walk into a bank? Humans are you can't eliminate the judgment. Our entire existence is comparisons and judgments, right? You can't get around that.
It's got to be a conscious decision to not want to judge,
Yeah.
and not everybody wants that for themselves. Not everybody wants to become a better person, but for those of us that do, we have to become conscious of our implicit biases, and we've got to think before we open our mouths, and we have to quickly run scenarios through our heads of, if I was the recipient of the words I'm about to speak, would that offend them?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that
I offend a lot of people.
I do too.
But I often think it's going to be funny, and so my intent is good. My delivery is often poor, though.
And it's something, it's hard. It's a very fine line to kind of have these discussions, because you're like, well, why should I change because you're offended?
Why should you get rid of your tattoos if they're offended, right?
But at the same time, I've heard an argument that I thought was pretty smart the other day, and I can't even quote the source, but it was a woman saying that we do not have a right to walk through the world and not be offended. That is not a right of ours.
Well, say that again. I'm not following.
We do not have the right to walk through this world and not be offended. Everybody around us shouldn't change the way that they talk and who they are so that they do not offend us. But there's a difference between discrimination and offending somebody. And I think a lot of people don't know what that difference is. Especially in this industry, I've had to talk to some of my associates says that joke's inappropriate. Do you understand you just violated X, Y, and Z? And they're like, yeah, but I know the company that I'm with. And so I know that you're not going to take offense. But are you saying that you're now conscious that somebody's going to take offense and that you could potentially be violating fair housing or discrimination? Well, yes, but I'm not going to say it in front of those people. I was like, then you shouldn't say it in front of me either.
Yeah.
So
I once told a masturbation joke in front of a PPAR CE class.
In front of the CE class?
Yeah, there's like 40 people there. It was perfectly timed, and it was funny. And it didn't go over too well.
But, people who masturbate aren't part of a protected class, so you weren't discriminating.
Point well received. There was no discrimination. It was just a matter of taste, and I got to say, the timing was delivered on the money. They just didn't. It just didn't I don't know. They didn't think they should laugh. I think they all went home and told their spouse, and they laughed when they got home. Yeah. They're like, okay, I couldn't have laughed in front of my peers.
I don't want people to judge me because I laughed at that joke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't care how funny it was or well timed. Yeah. So I've learned. Usually I learn the hard way, but and it's usually something that I think is going to be funny, and people take it wrong. I don't really have a whole lot of malice in me, but it's usually supposed to be funny. So I think that's a very important topic, and I tell you this, I can't quite decide if our country's constant talking about the topic makes it better or worse.
Oh, worse. I definitely feel it's worse. And for some people, even people of marginalized classes think that us talking about it too much is they don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
When I first stood up the D&I committee for PPAR, this was 2020, 2021, I had a member who was very upset that we stood that committee up. She was an immigrant, and she's married to a minority man, and said it was people like me who perpetuated discrimination in our country because we keep bringing it up when there's not a problem.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel torn in two different directions, because we have a whole group of minorities saying that it is a problem, and then we have another group saying it's not a problem, stop talking about it.
Yeah. And
I'm very passionate about fair housing and anti-discrimination in housing, and I don't know if what the actions that I'm taking or the committees I'm serving on are right or wrong. Are they hurting? Are they helping? It's just it is a very fine line.
Well, but you have to stand up for what you believe in, for sure. And I guess how do you deliver that? Is it constantly pointing out injustices and unfair behavior, or is it how do we get better? And I think that to me is very important, because there's always going to be bad actors, right? But if we also find what we're looking for. So if we're always constantly trying to find where these problems are, we're going to find them everywhere, right? Like, why did I paint the wall that color? Don't you know, back in the 1800s, something, right? You could find problem everywhere. But when you look at it and say, instead of always trying to identify a problem, let's identify a solution. And like you said, protected classes. So you can't discriminate equal housing. You can't discriminate based off of race, gender, national origin, sexual preference, family status, and some other stuff, right? So those are all protected classes. You should, to me, it's mind-boggling that people would discriminate against. Like, I can't quite understand it. Like, you're in business to do business. I don't understand why you would care who you're helping. We're on the same boat, right? And it's like, I'm going to shoot my cannon at the people on the same boat, but they're on the other side of the boat, when eventually we're just going to put a bunch of holes in the boat and we're all going to sink.
But this discrimination is not just happening agent to consumer. So Florida and Georgia, I think, are the two countries that have, dear Lord, the two states that have some of the strictest laws that have recently been passed in regards to foreign nationals purchasing property in those states. And so they have restrictions that say, and they're very targeted countries that these restrictions are against. So, for example, investors from China can only buy so many acres of land to cultivate for farming, because it would take away too much money from the American people if they bought up all this acreage to grow corn, and then that would take away from the American farmer. And that certain nationals, regardless of their citizen status here in the U.S., could not buy property to build on within X amount of feet or X amount of miles from a military installation. Strictly because their country has, strains with the U.S. And I'm a mom, and my husband and
You're a mom and a husband.
My kids come with me to this country, and I buy land to build a house on, and now I'm being told I can't because of where I immigrated from.
Well, but if you are here legally, I don't think there's restrictions on that.
Yes, there are.
So let's say a country had a mortal enemy, a communist, we'll just call them China for argument's sake.
China's one of the countries that's specifically named.
And what if that country bought all of the agricultural land around, say, 50 military installations, and they bought thousands and thousands of acres, all of it specifically around military? So you don't think that could pose some sort of threat?
I'm not saying it doesn't, but
because that has happened.
I know, and that's part of the reason why this legislation is in place. But it doesn't specifically go into X amount of acres, or a individual versus a country, or if an individual's purchasing it, or if it's a entity that is a U.S. entity but it's owned by a foreign national. It's just a lot of the laws are blanketing that causes restrictions for individual families just trying to buy a home.
Well, and I guess that would be assuming that they're just trying to buy a home and not surround a military base, right? But I also think that there has to be some sort of restrictions, and I actually think this should be even with. I think cities should have limitations as well, and this is not based off of race or national origin or anything like that. But when you have a place like a big, huge corporation that comes in and buys like 80% of the rental properties, and then then at that point they dictate the market. They rule the market. It's like if you owned all the gas stations in town, you control the gas prices, right? And then what it does is it also makes it almost impossible if you have a client or you yourself want to say, hey, look, I'm going to go buy my very first investment property. You should be able to go do that, right? Without having to worry about massively huge companies that come in and just gobble them all up. I think there should be restrictions on things like that. Like if you're going to, as an example, if you're going to own more than, say, 8 rental properties, the rules change. So they do this with cars as well already. They've done this for 20 years with cars in Colorado. If you sell more than it's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 cars, you have to get a dealership license, and then you're taxed different, you're treated different, you have your different licensing, and like a realtor, if you're going to represent somebody, you have to be licensed. Whereas if you're just a mom and pop doing something, 1 or 2 houses or something like that, it's going to be different rules. That's the way you do with cars. So I feel like there has to be restrictions and protections for the general society, but
and I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's out there, and there are huge proponents for these types of restrictions, and huge groups that are completely against it. And the question is it violating any of the fair housing laws that are in place? And those are the types of conversations that we have at NAR.
Well, that's interesting. I'd be interested to hear what NAR says about it, because fair housing, if you are a citizen, and maybe that's how it needs to be looked. If you're a citizen, you get certain rules, and if you're a non-citizen, you get certain rules. And maybe that takes away. I don't care if you're from Russia, from China, from Guatemala. If you're a citizen, you have all the rights of a citizen. If you're not, and you're a foreign national, then we have a slightly different box for you for your purchasing. Then that kind of takes away the I guess the elimination of discrimination based off where you're from or what you look like or what your family is or whatever, and instead categorizes it into a class that once you go through the citizenship process and you become a citizen, then now you have all the rights as a full citizen. And I know that's a very controversial approach as well. I mean, what did we do in World War II? We put all the Japanese families who were here into pseudo concentration camps, right? Or in the 80s with the Cuban crime wave is what they called it with Castro, right? And we kept them in caged kind of areas. But if you get I mean, you have green cards and you have other statuses, but I think it should be more based off of your statuses as opposed to where you're from.
So, yeah, and I know that they are working on trying to put some, I don't want to say restrictions in place, but guidelines. So the Asian Realtors Association, ARIA, came in and presented to us in the spring because it also is during the time at the beginning of the year when there was a lot of Asian hate, and you heard a lot of physical attacks were happening. And at the same time, these states are putting this legislation or proposing legislation. So there's a lot of organizations working hand in hand with NAR to make sure that, our country is protected, but at the same time, we aren't restricting housing availability to.
So I have a wild idea. What if you just couldn't discriminate based off of race or gender or family, and that, like, it doesn't matter who you are, you just can't discriminate against it, because that's the way the rule's written. But people break the rule.
Yeah.
Right. So that, and it to me, it's a very important thing that you just, like, if you get caught breaking that rule, there's serious consequences. The rule's there for a reason, so that we all have equal opportunity. If I have money in the bank and I have a job that I can prove income and my credit score is a certain amount, I don't care where you're from. You're probably going to qualify to buy a house, right? Now, if I discriminate outside of or within those classes, then I should lose my license. So it's just, I don't know. To me, it's like maybe I'm just inexperienced in the real world, but it seems very, very simple to me. Just like, here's the rules, don't do it. And I don't care. We don't have to give you special privilege, and we also don't have to discriminate. So I don't care who you are. If you're an American citizen, here's the equal housing, and here's all the discriminatory classes. You can't do it. Yeah. I don't know.
It seems that simple, but it's not, because
I know.
there's politicians, and
I'm living in a fake world.
As you and I.
Yeah,
they're not simpletons.
They're complicated and obviously smart. Yeah. So
much smarter than me.
Yeah. I would not want to be in that position. That would be horrible, because then you would have to get, instead of actually having like an honest discussion, an honest debate, or an honest exploration of possibilities, you'd have to get passionately fanatic about it with like, even if you didn't fully believe it, it's like, I've got to be like fanatical. And that's what it seems like our rules are sitting around. So, this is a total side note here, but do you think roller skating helped you in real estate?
I got some referrals. Yeah.
So, well, for anybody who's listening, just so, when I first met Wendy, she gave me tickets to roller derby dames. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, Pikes Peak. At the time, it was Pikes Peak Derby Dames.
Pikes Peak Derby Dames. Okay.
Now we're Pikes Peak Roller Derby.
Okay,
So we can be
I was
more
close.
inclusive.
I was close. Oh, what's the name of it now?
Pikes Peak Roller Derby.
What happened to the dames?
It wasn't inclusive.
But it was only women.
And those who identify as women.
That was one of the most, I'm not going to say shocking displays of powerful women that I've seen. It was awesome. So I took my son, and this had to be like almost 10 years ago or something like that, right? It was. Remember, they were in the.
We were at the city
like
auditorium.
An amphitheater, yeah, auditorium, right? And it was almost like a basketball court, and it was just. And you guys would just roll around. I'd be like, at first I was like, oh, it's kind of boring. But then you start realizing there's actual strategy. There's actual, like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you would see somebody just get laid out.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, holy
fun.
smokes.
It was fun.
But I guess more to the question of getting referrals. Do you think that doing that, because you traveled, you did all kinds of stuff, right? Do you think that being, I guess, that mindset of being successful at that, because you were pretty good at it, that mindset, do you think that mindset has helped you in real estate?
I don't know. No, probably not. What is what?
Next
Honestly,
question.
I'll be honest. I mean, it was Derby for me was an identifier. It was me finding myself, because for years I was insert my husband's rank at the time, Bailey's wife, and I was Trevor's mom. I had no identity outside of that. So roller derby gave me my identity, but it did not make me a strong person in life. And I still have a hard time advocating for myself, or negotiating for myself, but I am a better advocate for others. It's just recently that I've started, I think, seeing my own personal value that I can advocate for myself. But Derby didn't do that. Derby was my outlet, so I beat the crap out of the women on the track.
I was going to say,
and not my husband or my son.
If anybody saw you, they wouldn't think you had a hard time advocating for yourself. So you advocated with a quick little elbow or something.
So if I was a blocker, so it was my job to protect my jammer. So I was advocating for somebody else, either clearing a hole for somebody else so they could get through, or taking out their jammer so that we could score more points. It was never to protect myself. It was always to protect my jammer.
Interesting. Well, and I guess maybe that does fall into your passion for what you're doing in real estate.
Yeah.
Right? Which makes you very good at it when you're passionate about something.
Thank you.
So you left your other company and you went to Keller Williams.
Yes.
And Keller Williams is a very large. It's one of the biggest in the country.
I think have almost 170,000 agents across the globe, and they are the largest brokerage in the world.
Don't they have already, a company that big have already built in people to do the advocacy, stuff like that?
I was brought in, I think, more to represent at a local level, because I don't think there's a whole lot of Keller agents that are in leadership. I know Mark Hubert is at our brokerage as well. He's the incoming president of RSC, which is our MLS. But one of the things I did at my previous brokerage was scholarship my agents to go through Leadership Academy through the association, and brought them up as leaders in the association.
Interesting. How would you do that?
So anybody, past graduates send nominees to PPAR, and then they interview and select. And then they go through things like the economic update annually. They go to Realtor Day at the Capitol. They just went to the State of the City with the mayor. So it's not just becoming more involved with real estate, but the things that you should be looking at as a business professional, because we're all CEOs of our own companies, right? And what you should be keeping up to date on, like the state of your city, the state of our economy at the local, state, and national level. The Colorado Association of Realtors also offers a leadership academy that goes a little bit deeper and a little bit further, and then NAR has it as well. But pulling up people to follow behind us, lifting up as we continue to climb up that ladder, that's one of the things I always did at my past brokerage. And so when I walked away, we had chairs at PPAR that were from equity that I had pulled up. We had another equity agent on the board of directors. We had equity agents serving on committees.
And these are people you had brought in and built up.
I had brought in and built up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because buying and selling is just a very small piece of what you should be doing in this industry. It's not just about a commission and a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's about taking care of the industry in which you work.
Well, and it's important, I think, to have real professionals in this industry. I think it's far too easy to get licensed and not know what you're doing and have no.
Don't get me started. I'm going to back away from the mic.
Step back. All right. I think it's way too easy to do this poorly.
I agree. And I actually brought this up to Marshall Waters, who is the head of the Real Estate Commission at DORA, about the low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we are dealing with the majority of the time a person's single largest purchase in their lives, and that the minimal amount of education and hours required in this state to pass the exams is insane to me.
Yeah.
The amount of they have special commission hearings. If you are not initially approved for your real estate license based on criminal activity, you can appeal the real estate commission, and very rarely do they deny.
Oh, really?
And so her response when I questioned license reform was pretty much that we cannot deny members of our community the ability to earn a living wage through real estate, that this is one of the few professions where you can earn a substantial wage if you apply yourself, which I don't want to say we earn a substantial wage for doing nothing, because that's such a fallacy. But that it's not the commission's job to deny somebody that right. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Isn't that exactly their job, is to qualify people for that right?
My thoughts exactly. And because the barrier to entry is so low, we do have, it's a few bad apples that spoil the whole barrel. That is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, part of the reason why our industry is under attack.
Yeah.
Not just locally, but, nationally.
And, with that, I was saying that when this lawsuit came out, that there's going to be additional lawsuits because of it, because people don't know how to, everybody's going to be held at a higher standard. You have to understand it better. So to me, it's like what happened in the mortgage industry, in 2013, you have, you have like Dodd-Frank and TRID and stuff coming out in 2013. And then it was maybe 17 or something like that when they came out with the LE and the CD and all of these different things. And then even licensing way back in, 2008 or 9 or something like that, or 10, all of that, everybody gets better, right? And we're held to a pretty high standard as far as doing the job properly. It's not super, super difficult to get your license, but to do it properly, it is kind of held. Now, one thing that real estate agents, I think, or realtors in general, have going for them, even though the barrier to entry is relatively low, it's expensive to maintain if you're not doing anything with it.
Is it?
You don't think?
No, I
don't. It's like a couple grand a year? Or what
I don't think so. And I think we need to define that there's, or make sure that we understand that there's a difference between a realtor and a real estate agent. So in order to maintain your license as a real estate agent, you need to take 24 hours worth of continuing education per license cycle. So every 3 years.
Per 3 years, okay. So 8 hours a year.
And you can pretty much get all those classes for free through a title company, through a lender, through whomever. Yeah. And license renewal, I think, is $150. That's all you have to do to maintain your real estate license. I guess you
technically don't have to have your local or state boards or anything like that, right?
No, and there's
interesting.
So there's a lot of outcry from agents who do not understand exactly what NAR does, that does not understand what is going on with this settlement, that are just saying down with NAR. We shouldn't have to pay dues.
They've actually started up a couple new ones, trade organizations.
And so,
just because they sold your name and all your data and basically sold you down the river, it's a big deal.
But
next question?
Well, I want to make the point too that there is no National Association of Home Sellers. There's no National Association of Home Buyers. Who do you think is advocating for those consumers, for private property rights.
I think NAR's I think the biggest trade organization in the country.
1.5 million people.
Yeah.
Or 1.5 million members. But yes, that is also what NAR does. It is not just that what people are saying that they are MLS and policy dictators.
Yeah.
For example, PPAR and multiple associations, along with the Colorado Association of Realtors, ascended the Capitol building back in May and talked to our councilmen there, our congressmen, and our representatives there about amending the VA to allow for the buyers to cover the buyer agent commission in light of the NAR settlement.
And VA did make that change.
And VA did make that. They made it within 10 days of us going there. As I'm not just saying Colorado, but 10,000 realtors from across the country went into the Capitol over the course of that week.
Of their respective states.
Of their respective states,
Okay.
petitioning their legislators, saying this needs to happen.
Did you show up with signs and scream, or did you do it in a civil manner?
We were invited into some of their private chambers, and some of them we met in a town hall meeting type style.
Oh, cool. So what would you recommend an average realtor, right? Like meaning just not part of committees, not part of they have their license, they do a handful of deals, but they want to do better. Other than just being aware, they want to do better in making sure of equal treatment for everybody. What would you suggest? Like, do they take classes? Do they join a group? Like, specifically, what should they do in order to improve in that area?
Take classes, do research, read. I'll tell you two things. One of the biggest eye-opening things that I've ever watched is the Long Island investigation into real estate practices in Long Island, where Newsweek went undercover.
When was this? I didn't know about this.
2020, 2021, somewhere around,
Okay.
maybe 2019, somewhere around that time frame. And you can go and watch. It's about an hour-long investigation where they had secret cameras, they had secret shoppers, and they would go into same brokerage, meet face-to-face with an agent. They both had pre-approval letters from a local mortgage company, and some buyers were taken out immediately to see properties, and others were said, I'll set you up on an MLS and get back to you, and they were never set up on an MLS or gotten back to. There was another instance where they sent in 2 different shoppers from 2 different ethnic groups. One did not have a pre-approval, said I forgot it at home. The other one, they both said that they forgot it at home. And the minority buyer said, I'm sorry, I can't show you anything without that pre-approval. It's against my office policy. If you go home and email it to me, then we can schedule another appointment. They did that, never heard back. And the white consumer was taken out to show properties immediately without that pre-approval letter. So knowing
I'd like to watch that.
You should. Yeah. It's amazing. Doing research, reading the book The Color of Law.
The Color of Law.
The Color of Law is a great read. The Colorado Association of Realtors during Fair Housing Month, they actually have events every single week through the month of April. Those are open to anybody. If you are a member of the National Association of Realtors, they have the implicit bias class, which talks about implicit bias, has you take answer some questions, and then exposes your subconscious and implicit biases. That's very...
Oh, everybody has them.
It's very... Well, being conscious of them and being unconscious of them is 2 different things. And so, like, what was revealed to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I never realized that when I do this or when I think this way...
I hate white girls named Wendy. I had no idea.
We all do. So that's eye-opening.
What is that called again?
So it's called implicit bias. It's the
Okay.
implicit bias training. Then they also have...
And this is through NAR.
NAR.
See, I was like, oh, I better...
Then they also
Better be
have
conscious there.
it's a virtual neighborhood called and the program's called At Home with Diversity. And you go through the virtual neighborhood and you're an agent. You could pretend that you're an LO, and here are your clients asking you these things. And then they put you in a situation and you have to choose A or B. So one of the things that opened my mind was the question was, you have been referred to somebody that speaks Korean and does not speak English. What do you do? And it was like
find a Korean realtor.
Right. That answer was wrong.
What? What am I supposed to do? Do sign language?
Find an interpreter. Find an
No.
interpreter.
I've tried that before. It's
Because
terrible.
somebody else in real estate that can be an interpreter, because I was like, how's that the wrong answer? I'm looking out in their best interest. I don't know if I can fulfill my fiduciary duties to them if I can't, properly
That's a terrible
speak with
answer.
them. So the thought process behind it with NAR is that they were referred to me. They are trusting me. I'm saying I'm unwilling to work with you because there's a communication barrier. And so I'm going to shove you off to someone else versus...
I mean, that's one way to look at it, but look at it the same way. You're referred to me and you trust me, and I'm doing what's in your best interest. And in your best interest, I'm going to get you... in fact, I'll refer you to 3 people that speak Korean. You can choose any of those 3. I've used interpreters before. I've used the phone lines. I've brought in kids and family members. It's always difficult with interpreters. It's way easier if you have, I'm not going to say native, but if you have a fluent ability. I've even had realtors that speak Spanish and bring me a Spanish client. I've worked with them and we've had success at it, but to me, it's difficult with the interpreter. And then who knows if they're interpreting properly as well.
So the system has a response as to why, and I can't remember. It's been a while since I've taken the simulation, but they had a very good explanation as to why. But I think the key thing is that it's easier. I'm willing to work with somebody who speaks English because it's easier to work with them. It's more difficult to work with somebody who does not, that I have to go through an interpreter, so I'm going to refer you out.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say you were in Korea and you were going to buy a house. And you had a dude who spoke Korean who was going to show you houses. And then he's got somebody in his office who happens to speak English. Wouldn't you feel more comfortable speaking to the guy who spoke English? Because you could have a conversation. Like, you as the consumer, wouldn't that make more sense? Because you could ask questions, and things are interpreted differently from one language to another. There could be misunderstandings that can't be explained. There can be, how am I going to explain a loan estimate in box A and box B versus box J and box H? And we're trying to go through, and they're asking detailed questions, and I have this interpreter who also doesn't understand anything dealing with a loan estimate. And so it's just like raw data, and they can't properly explain it. I see there's some big problems with that answer.
And I'm not saying whether I think that NAR's response to my answer was correct or incorrect.
No, they're wrong.
I will tell you that the Colorado Association of Realtors is working on compiling a list of translators, trusted translators that are versed in the industry that can actually serve as interpreters.
Well, see, that's different though. If they have some sort of knowledge about it, if they could explain what a seller's property disclosure is and why certain things are important, and be able to explain the legal ramifications of that when you go to sell your house. I think it's important to have somebody at least with an understanding of what you're doing. Maybe these people have to be licensed as well.
Yeah, because we've talked about, sitting on the local D&I board and the state board, we've talked about liability. And how do I know, can I just rely on the sun? And do I take on a certain amount of liability if I haven't vetted who that interpreter is? Mm-hmm. And so that is why, at least in our state, CAR is working on compiling a list of vetted interpreters.
I think it's a great idea. I'd say get them licensed, have them even be active in the industry.
And I actually I'm on a work group. Actually missed a call yesterday because I was double booked. We have multiple work groups within the D&I committee at the state level. And one of them is working on translation services, trusted translation services, whether that be an interpreter or what translation services can we rely on to actually translate the contract into the buyer's native language.
Interesting. Sounds like a job for ChatGPT.
No.
What is DNI?
Diversity and inclusion.
Oh, and inclusion, not diversity in inclusion.
No, DNI.
D and I. Okay,
DNI.
not DNI.
It used to be a lot of them were DEI.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of
negative connotations with the
different
silliness.
interpretations of what equity means.
What do you think it means?
I think it means what you think it means.
What? Really? I don't know what it means. I just know what politicians say it means.
So, there's certain things I think it's best if I keep my opinions to myself.
Oh, okay. All
like
right.
what I think about your hair today.
I was worried about that today. I was like, man, I haven't had a haircut in a while. What is she going to think? And then I thought to myself, it doesn't matter. Her hair's going to be way messier than mine, so it's totally
It's been
fine.
a long day, Tim. Jeez.
Well, I appreciate you taking all of my silliness and understand that's where most of it comes from. I take that topic very, very serious, but I also don't spend a ton of my energy hyper worried about it. And part of the reason why is like in my bubble, it doesn't really happen. I know people are judging me. I know they are because we're humans. I know they're judging me because of either where I grew up. I grew up in the super upper class of Canyon City. So of course they're judging me for, well, I grew up very blue collar. I grew up, so they're judging me on that. They're judging me, unfortunately, about my hair. They're judging me for, whatever it is. And I have realized that I completely accept it. Like that's not whatever. It's going to happen. But when it comes to doing our jobs, there are rules in place. And there are, outside of your own personal biases, outside of your own personal opinions, we have very specific boxes that you do not go out of in our industry. And so and again, this is just me being naive. It's crazy to me to think that people go outside of those boxes. Like I have a hard time comprehending it. I'm a very simple person, as you mentioned earlier. Thank you for mentioning that, by the way. So within my simple mind, I just don't get it. Like what, you're here to do real estate.
Yeah.
Who cares, right? Like just go do real estate. Do it the best of your ability.
I can share with you some. I can share with you the DOJ one I referred to earlier that was done in lending. Let me tell you how close to home this hits. I'm going to share two things.
Yeah.
It's 2019 or 2020. Southern Denver, Aurora, Parker, maybe somewhere around there. Yeah. There was a biracial couple who applied for home improvement loan. Where is it?
Like a HELOC?
Yeah, something like that. Came in and their husband and wife were there. Pictures of all of them were up on the wall. And their appraisal came in about $100,000 below where it should have come in. Mm-hmm. They're like, this is crazy. Why did this happen? Asked all the questions. Couldn't get a straight answer. Asked for a reappraisal. This time, the white family member, or I don't know if it was the husband or the wife, asked for a family member to stand in as a spouse so that they were the same color. They removed all the biracial photos from the walls, and this time the appraisal came in $50,000 above where they thought it should come in. So
different appraiser though.
Different appraisers, same lender. $150,000 difference between the two appraisers. And they filed a discrimination case against the bank.
Interesting.
So that can easily be Googled. But, I pride myself in bringing in education at my previous brokerage that fought discrimination. Like I said, a lot of risk mitigations. And you can get a lot of risk mitigation in different parts of real estate just simply through education. But as a member of the Fair Housing Policy Committee for NAR, I had my brokerage secret shopped from January till July of this year.
Really?
And
were you one of the agents?
No.
Okay. I was just wondering how you did. I was just wondering if you got a translator or not.
So, NAR partnered with a third party that focuses on equal housing. It's a nonprofit to come in and do all this, and be on the lookout because we were in the process of based on the findings that they brought back from the brokerage. PPAR is going to be putting together a informative session, like a 3-hour session with NAR in April of 2025. So we're working on that right now. But some of the things that I found, I was blown away with, that my agents, or they were my agents, in my heart, I don't feel it was intentional, outright discrimination. I think it was subconscious, implicit biases that they had, but similar buyers, met with them at properties, set them up on MLS searches, had the same criteria. We're relocating. We don't know exactly where we want to live yet. And the minority buyers were set up on MLS searches on the South Side and Fountain. Exact same qualifications of white buyers are set up in Briargate and Northgate.
Same price points?
Yes, same price points.
Well, you're getting an entirely different house.
Right.
But are you looking for a 2-bedroom house or a 6-bedroom
They were
house?
identical. What they were looking for was identical. They made sure that, like, within, instead of putting 2 bedrooms, one might put 2 plus bedrooms.
Doesn't an agent ask what part of town you want to live
Both
in?
of them said we're relocating. We don't know the area well enough yet. So show us the entire city, and then we'll be able to figure it out. And they actually...
So they discriminated on both of them.
Yeah.
So they oh, yeah, you white people don't want to live down Fountain. It's dangerous. And they told the ethnic family, oh, you don't want to live up north. It's expensive. And it's a bunch of weirdos up there. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And that's just one. We had 10 cases.
10?
Yep.
10 different agents?
10 different agents. Though we had 10 negatives. They shopped...
Did they tell you positives or just tell you how you screwed up?
No, they shopped 40. I think it was 40 or 50 agents, or 40 or 50 instances.
Yeah.
And 10 came back as some of them I didn't totally agree with. One agent met with a female buyer, and there was a whiskey collection at that house, and he invited her to a whiskey tasting. Then there was a male who looked at the same house.
Were they both single?
I don't know. But I'm assuming that they didn't show up with a counterpart, but he did not invite the male to the whiskey tasting, but only invited the female to the whiskey tasting.
Same agent?
Same agent.
Wait, hold on. I got to back up. This is at the same house or different house?
Same house. Because it had a whiskey bar, a whiskey collection.
And there was a man and a woman there
at
the same time?
There was a single female buyer, and then a single male buyer.
Wait.
And he invited
the agent.
The agent invited the single female buyer to a whiskey tasting with him and did not invite the male.
That's because he's straight and he likes women.
So that's discrimination, because you have to treat all consumers the same. If you're going to invite one to the whiskey tasting, you need to invite all to the whiskey tasting.
Interesting.
That one I thought was a little out there, but maybe he felt discriminated against.
Well, I could, especially if he's into the realtor, I could see how he would be offended by that. But people have that. I actually really want to do this. Implicit buyer, is that what it's called?
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
I'll send it to you.
Implicit bias. I would like to find out what my bias are. My wife told me one time that the point of life is to discover our hypocrisies and then try to fix them. Mm-hmm. And this would be awesome. I would love to know where. I know I have some that are probably so deep seated that it's going to bring out all kinds of. I'm probably going to need therapy after I go through it, because I'm going to. I didn't even know I did that. And then at home with diversity, I think I want to do both of those, especially if it tells me where I'm right and wrong.
I don't know if you can get access to At Home with Diversity since you're not an NAR member, but I will see what I can do. But implicit bias, so there's an implicit bias class. However, before they did the class, there was a YouTube video that takes you through the steps that the class does.
I want to go in totally blind.
I can send you the YouTube video.
Yeah. Well, I want them to ask me stuff, and then I want them to judge me based off of my answers.
Oh, it will.
But if you're going to send me a YouTube video, it might let me. I don't want to. I want to go totally unprepared.
This is what we did before we took the class. I don't think you can take the class because it's an NAR class. But so when they first started developing the implicit bias program, the video was the very first thing, and so it'll ask you when you see this, how would you react?
Gotcha. I'm super pumped to take those classes. I'm going to let you know my results too.
Oh, no. Do I know?
And then if I find out that, I say that, I'm naive and I don't think this, and it's not that I don't think it exists, it's that I don't understand how it exists, right? I don't understand, other than the human psychology of people want to be around, like people are attracted in sales. We're always taught people are attracted to people who are like them. Mm-hmm. And so our tonality and how we speak, how we stand, how we sit, how we breathe, you know what I mean? We're mirroring people, and we're always taught that people like themselves, and they like people that they want to be like. So it's interesting that we play the role of trying to be liked by the client, and this is, and I understand that, and I totally accept it, and I've made my profession out of understanding that the best I can. But this is going to be super interesting because it's going to be like me not trying to be a salesperson and like, where's my problems? I'm kind of excited.
Once you do this, so I know of 2 certified instructors of this class in our state. that maybe it'd be beneficial for you to hold a LO training in our area, and that you advocate.
What could I call the class? You're racist and didn't know?
I think that would be a good name.
Yeah.
I think that would invite a lot of people in, because it's an easy conversation to have.
You hate men and you had no idea.
No, I knew. I'm kidding.
Little did you know. I think that's going to be interesting. I'm excited to take the class, and thank you for sharing all of the insights and giving me the real scoop on everything.
Absolutely.
And it's something that you're passionate about. I'm excited that Keller Williams, when you called me and told me that you had moved over there, I was pretty excited. I think it's a great opportunity over there. They have a lot of agents, they have great training rooms, and I think it's a very, very good opportunity there.
Thank
so
you.
I'm excited, and whatever we can do to help support you, please let us know.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for asking all the questions that were on the
Did
list.
I ask a single
that
question?
Marquis sent me, because I was prepared for every single one of them. I could reference
I didn't even look at
facts
it.
and resources.
What's the number one mistake that new agents make? Never mind. We're out of time.
Yeah.
So that's good. Oh, that wraps up another episode with my friend Wendy Bailey. Please reach out to her with any questions about any of the topics that we went through today. Check out all of our episodes at agentsuccesspodcast.com.
That wraps up another episode of Agent Success Podcast. Remember, you can find new episodes each week at agentsuccesspodcast.com. We hope you found the insights and best practices shared today truly valuable. And if you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, your success is a journey of learning and improvement. So let's keep hustling, thriving, and learning. Until next week, this is Tim Chase.